All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Patrick Phelps McEwen. I'm the marketing director here at the ArtsCenter in Carborough. And tonight we have with us our gallery artist for July and August, Cade Carlson, who's going to be talking about some of the works in his current exhibition entitled Three Collections. And if you have any questions for the artist, feel free to drop them in the chat. So now, without further ado, here is Cade with Three Collections.
Howdy, everyone. As Patrick indicated, my name is Cade Carlson. Welcome to my exhibition at the ArtsCenter, Three Collections. So before getting into it, I guess how this is going to be organized for this talk and tour. I will be talking about myself a little bit, my origins, or where I sort of developed what I do, and then I'll move into going into a couple pieces for each of the three collections. So to begin, see some of my work. My mediums that I use are spray paint and collage, and these effects that I gained from the spray paint. I do this for about 13 years. About 2007, where initially for doing spray paint, one of the things I was making, just messing around with spray paint, making stencils of my friends, make some colorful pieces to give them for Christmas gifts or things along those lines. During the time period where I was doing some more experimentation with the collage, that started just like adapting to it after I found an old Mother Goose book in I think what was it? Like a burned down house somewhere in Nashville. Why I was into burned down house, don't ask me. It really should have been not safe, but I got this book and some very interesting images in it, Mother Goose stuff, and started cutting them out and attaching them to the spray paint, and I really liked what I was getting with it, so just start to run with it, which is a big theme of what I do when I start to just experiment with things or find one little thing that I like, mostly by accident. I'll just take that and run with it and sort of make a big bulk of pieces. I'm definitely a quantity-based artist. If there's a phrasing for quality or quantity-based, even though I believe my work is very high in quality. But regardless of that, so as I was talking about the spray paint, these effects that I gather right here were actually discovered by accident. I had been spray painting and collaging some pieces in a good friend's basement. They let me go in there and be able to have a nice art space, and that was wonderful. Very thankful to them for that. And I had spray painted some pieces and left one of them out to dry out on the side porch. And at one point it started to rain. And so naturally I thought, oh my goodness, my piece is it's about to get wet. I better go get that. So I went out and grabbed the piece, brought it back in, had some water on top. And so I just wiped the piece itself. After I wiped the piece, I took a look at it and I started to get these sort of pocketed or these bubbles from the water being removed from it. So once I saw that, I definitely had a moment going, ooh, I like this a whole lot. And just took that and ran with it and started experimenting with the paint itself and its interaction with water. And so from that point on, in the 11, 12 years since then, my work has been fully about, well, not fully, but predominantly about experimenting with spray paint and its interactions with water to be able to produce different effects and trying to wrest some form of control over it, even though when doing this, I'll be free to admit there is a lot of sort of chaos going on where I certainly can never be able to start out and go, okay, I know what this is going to look like 100% or even 80% once I apply the spray paint in the water itself. And so again, a lot of experimenting and a lot of happy accidents going, ooh, I really like how that turned out. I'm going to sort of keep that in mind how I got that, even though knowing I'm not going to be able to get that exact same effect again, but the pursuit of trying to get that effect again reveals more different things that I can do with it, and sort of just snowballs and just taking those things and just running with them. And so these three collections, really a culmination of the last, I'd say, year and a half of my output. Granted, I've had a lot more time to be able to work on these pieces, and so I have about 58 total pieces in this collection reflected from that time period. So yeah, without further ado, I'll start getting to some of the pieces themselves. So this collection, this is right here, this is a 2019 collection. They called it that because these are larger / medium-sized works that I completed in the year 2019. And normally when I'm operating or working on stuff, I try to consciously phrase the process as problem solving. I'm not really sure how I can articulate that in a way that doesn't sound crazy, but a lot of it is me sort of looking at the different aspects of my work and thinking in terms of variables and rule sets, where like say, oh, I want to have everything match this sort of color, that'll be the rule I'll apply from that, or I want to have things really contrast, or I want to have things sort of floating, I want to have any sort of like little minutia or alteration of what I could do to create these pieces and try to sort of put, I'm going to call them roadblocks, or just little things to make things more interesting, give myself a sense of challenge. So I guarantee a lot of work, I could just really produce even more of this if I wasn't really thinking about what my end product was going to be. But putting these little, these things, these variables, these different rule changes, rule sets, and so forth, really creates the challenge to be able to try to wiggle my way into finding something. And once I hit that sweet spot and sort of laugh to myself and really smile and know that piece is done, I feel it's that endorphin rush right there. It feels really good, especially knowing in those moments, because it's an audience of one I'm really looking at, which is myself. But knowing that, or at least feeling comfortable, and then if I show this, I'm sure people will find something like very intriguing about it, or something that's like colorful to marvel at. But also with the narratives, which is another big portion of my work. The narratives can be sort of free form, and that like I certainly have an idea of what's going on, but other people can certainly interpret things and just like put their own like subjective reality into that, and sort of create just individual experiences from that. But above all, I'll freely admit my main aim is to make something that I find visually appealing and just visually pretty. So yeah, so again, going over, let's see here, different pieces. So as far as the collection, when I mentioned rule sets for the 2019 stuff, I didn't really have an overall rule set for the collection itself. It was more of a time to experiment with different spray paint techniques and sort of a different way of collaging. What I mean by those two things is, as far as the different spray paint techniques, if we take a look at this piece right here, it's the type of, the coloration is like not the sort of circular pock marks or just like spheres. They're like subtracted from me applying water to like spray paint that I'm used to, which would be like enamel spray paints or acrylics. But once I got the brand, a different brand of paint, I'll usually just go into a store when going to stores was a thing to find just like random different types of brands, because they'll react differently to water, or just like present some new colors, or just like a different feel from when I'm wiping it off. Because there's just so many things. I just feel like I really want to experiment. When I find like that brand of paint or something like that, I'll run with that. And with this stuff, I had acquired some Liquitex spray paint. And at the time, I didn't realize this, but it's a water-based spray paint, which I had not used at all for any of my work before. So initially, I had sprayed some paint down on a piece, and I was going to apply some water. I applied the water, and the paint just sort of vanished. It just turned into the water itself. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. It's I mean, I'd not be able to really do anything with this. But then in that same moment, I sort of stepped back. Well, what could I actually do with this? I'm not able to do the same things I was able to do with older spray paint works, as far as the removal and leaving like those holes. It shows like the different colors underneath. What if I let this dry? So I just had, the brain fart knee-jerk reactions like, okay, let's just see what this looks like. I'll come back to this in like 40 minutes, 2 hours. Came back and saw some stuff that was relative to this. And it's like, okay, we got another thing where I'm just gonna hit the ground and run with this. This is something I have not like messed with or like really have experience with, let alone just like watercolor in general. It's like, wow, this is really cool. I can actually do things like blend the paint colors together, which you wouldn't be able to do with like enamel or acrylic paints unless I would like push the cans together, which always seemed kind of dangerous to me. So again, these really pretty effects, just again, really, really ran with it. And let's see. Going over here. So this is a good example of some of the older spray paint techniques where you see none of the water-based paint is used in this. You can see I like spray, for example, like this red and this yellow on top of this purple. This is after I've applied water. Once I wipe the water off, the purple is revealed. And so this one is a whole bunch of just like color. I'm really throwing as much as I could on it until I got to that nice little like spot that nice color spot, if you will. But big determinant for narratives for my pieces, at least when starting out, is the color itself. And going back to talking about the rules, like, oh, well, I'm going to make everything sort of resemble this color or try to have it fit this or contrast with this as far as like changing the rule sets. That's really big as far as the consideration. And then like gathering the different pieces of collage and sort of sketching it out. my version of sketching is having either a board with some paint on it or a blank one. I just like take a whole bunch of the pieces of clippings. So a big portion of the collaging for me is just always cutting. And so I'll have this like stacks of construction paper, probably about this tall at this point, for each piece of the construction paper has either like, big stuff that I've cut out or little tiny things, and just so much of it. I sort of in my mind think of it as like if I have a drum machine and I have like a ton of like drum samples, those are the little pieces right there, and I can use those to construct a beat. And I really like having just so much choice when I'm starting to construct a narrative, and just a lot of times I'll start to construct a narrative, have like a couple of the larger pieces laid out, and then have the thought, oh, what about that little stuff that I had like I cut like 4 weeks to a year ago? Eventually find it, and boom, it integrates very well. So with this one, with the coloration, this one is called Enough. And you see this dude right here, or this person, he's really not having a very good time at all. And it's harder to see, but all throughout the piece itself, I have collage pieces of little butterflies. These little butterflies, I intentionally wanted to camouflage into the coloration itself. And so that's a very firm example of I wanted this to really just sort of be this really crazy, this not fun, anxiety-ridden place to be for this person, floating in there. He's got a snake on his leg. You see a whole bunch of the butterflies coming around. For butterflies itself are a big personal symbol. I'm not sure at what point I deemed it so, but at one certain point I sort of adopted that for me, the butterflies would be this anxiety. I'm not sure how I could articulate or sort of like BS how like, oh, well, every little anxiety is like a little pretty butterfly or something. It's just not quite that, but it's just something that really just drew me into that. I really ran with that, so it's just completely surrounded by like anxieties, which makes it sort of an autobiographical piece in that sense. Yeah, so consider this one wonderful success in that regard. Over here, some more of the older painting techniques where you can see this cutout right here. We applying a whole bunch of water and then wiping it off. And I mainly want to point this one out because of these flowers right here. I'll be coming back to that later, but this is like something that appears a whole lot in my later works from the flowers collection. So let's see here. And to move on, let's go over here to this side. Over here is some of the class of the 2019 collection. And one thing that I really started to look at with my pieces is the fact that a lot of the elements are floating. There's no like background or foreground that people or objects or animals are actively standing or sitting on. Things can just be ethereally just floating in the air, and I really like to lean in that as far as things in the upper regions. But at a certain point, I started to want some footing. I'm not sure where the urge was for that, but I just really, it's something I kind of want to investigate. Looking at this piece over here, you can see this large piece of collage, and this is from some magazine ad, and I wanted to use that as the big base right there. This is one of the earlier of me working with the foreground itself. So integrating that and having the pieces, whether it be people, butterflies, birds, cats, dogs, just like, having a nice place to be able to not just stand, but interact with the surrounding itself. Having this kid lie here, it just fits in my mind. And a lot of when I'm sketching by putting just the pieces together, once I hit that mental sweet spot of like, I see how this is like resting in this spot, it just like fits in that perfectly. And a lot of that is working with the collage elements scale. When I'm making these larger works, or even smaller works, the biggest consideration is working with the scale of the actual pieces that I'm cutting out, not the scale of the plank of wood. What I typically do is once I have maybe like a 2 by 2 foot by 2 foot plank of wood, I have it painted or not painted, I'll start sketching by putting the pieces on there. And I'll have 2 like yardstick sort of thickness of pieces of scrap wood. I'll sort of use it as a sort of crop and see like how something will look at a different size. Once I hit that, I'll saw it, I'll sand down, and then got the dimensions that I want for the piece itself. This one over here is a illustration of some of the new water techniques that I started to use with the paint. Once I threw down the water, threw down the paint, and threw down some water, let it dry for a little bit, and I had the green part. What if I had compressed air on this and started to make some different shapes? And so got a can of compressed air, went outside, once I got to that point, started spraying it around and had that ooh moment. And so really just leaned in hard with it on this piece right here. And then, and then with the collaging itself, see a whole bunch of color matching, specifically color matching going on with this. I really, really, really enjoy when things sort of work with the tones that are already present in the background. Though that could create maybe some lack of contrast, if you will, to some of the stuff. I like things that sort of have a uniformness. And again, that is a mental rule that I have, but the rules are meant to be bent and broken when applicable. And so I could be saying that about this piece, and the next one go completely opposite with that. But when working with this one, especially in particular, once I found that groove of getting things to be sort of samey color-wise, it really just felt good. That's a bunch of what the 2019 collection is as far as experimentation being the use of the water-based spray paint. You can see back to this one over here, you can see integration of both of the water-based spray paint with the purples and the reds in the background. But then, depending on the lighting, you can see this white and silver on top from the older techniques of spray I use for the water-based spray paint. And just trying to see how much I can work in there without going too overboard, and just pulling back and so forth. But again, a lot of it is organized chaos, where I can have all the preparations ready for it to be this one way, and it'll sort of go a completely different way. Most of the time, it'll be something I like. Some of the times, I'll just reset and just repaint the board, and that's perfectly okay. Gives me more opportunity to experiment. All right, so I'm talking about the footing. This led into this collection over here of 9 pieces, 9 larger scale pieces. And the collection called it the flowers, just because, as you can see in each of these pieces, there's a whole bunch of repeated use of these flowers. And what I really liked about the flowers, especially once I had the notion of using them in this way, is that it provides footing, so I don't have to worry about things seem like they're floating unless I actively want them to be perceived as floating. And it also solved the mental problem I had of, well, if I have footing for something, where the shadow is going to be for individuals. I didn't like the idea of going in with pen, especially if or paint, especially freehand, especially since I'm cutting out these things. Most of them are a one-time thing. If I mess up this piece of paper, that's kind of it for that piece of paper. And a lot of times when I've messed up, I'm applying a piece of paper with paste or glue or gel medium, and a smudge comes up. It's there, and I think to myself, okay, well, I messed up. How can I sort of massage this around or create it into an opportunity for something different to be applied to the piece? And a lot of the times that I've done that, it has actually worked out in my favor in that, once I have the new stuff on top or new interactions going on with where I messed up or smudged or something like that, they'll usually look, I don't want to say better, because that's more of an objective term. It's subjectively better in my eyes. Granted, a whole lot is probably the relief of just whew, I can cover up that mistake and I don't see the mistake anymore. No one's going to know about it except for you watching right here. Yeah, so the flowers created footing, and made so I didn't have to worry about the shadows. Everything could be ankle deep. And so what I mentioned earlier about the piece from 2019 collection of the flowers, these are the flowers from that specific magazine ad. I had a whole bunch of magazines that had this ad itself, and I ripped them out and cut the flowers out, but I had a finite number of those flowers, and so I tried to use them as sparingly as possible. And at that point, when I had to sort of playing with ideas of footing and how to anchor, that's a good word for it, anchor the different pieces, people, animals, fauna, flora, I ended up taking these pages of flowers, and I took them to Kinkus and got them copied. And doing that is actually may seem pretty benign in general, that creates a lot of options, right? But it was the first time I'd ever, in 13 years, 13 years, digitally manipulated or copied or maybe scanned some piece of collage to be able to make more of it. And it was a very liberating feeling. I'll admit it. It felt really good to be able to have this like stock of flowers that I can use as many of these as possible as I want. I can be sort of sloppy about it and just like really lay it on, not have to like worry about using every single last bit of utility, squeezing it out from the bits that I have. And I really, really like that idea of being able to create those copies, but then I sort of started to mentally backtrack on it, where I was thinking that creates almost too many options for me. It would allow me to break out of the notion of working with the scale of the pieces of paper that I'm collaging onto the things, because with digital manipulation, I can make things bigger, I can make things smaller. It makes I don't want to say would make the process less organic, so that's something I really like, just organically creating and composing, staging the different pieces of paper and clippings together to form a narrative. When if I were to do it digitally, it's just too many options. Like, you guys see me getting kind of flustered just thinking about all the possibilities. And so I sort of mentally thought, okay, well, I'm going to pull back on that a bit. I still make copies of certain things. They're usually smaller at this current junction. Remember, it's a rule, and so it can be changed at any time. With this current moment, I like the idea of pulling it back a bit and just really reserving it for like tiny things that I want to embellish pieces with, or making copies of the flowers themselves. So take a look at some of them, or I'll just point out a couple of things. This piece down here, it's called Fountain, and it was the first piece out of all of these in this collection of 9 flower works that I created after I made some copies of the flowers. It's more of this like the moment of experimenting to see, is this something I can actually do? And although the composition is like very focused right here, there's a lot of space right here I probably could have cropped out. I saw how everything was able to be anchored deep in the flowers, and it just made sense. So I really, really decided to run with it at that point. Moving on to another piece over here. So I'm having to come all the way to the opposite end. So with this piece right here, which is called Collars, a big portion of this one is, you can see it's very much more crowded than a lot of the other works from the 2019, or even from the Flower series, if you have seen any of it in person or online. And the big thing to sort of maybe just run and go with this was I wanted to have it be about just really, annoying men pretty much. The title of being collars, in my mind I thought, okay, it could be either gentleman collars or it can be cat collars. And it's just this scene of this just unhappy women surrounded by just not very friendly men, really, very obnoxious looking men. So a lot of it is me making sure that each element is interacting with another element. Each female person is interacting or being interacted upon by a male counterpart. And I even decided to sort of insert these animals in here, giving sort of like this look of desperation right here. This ostrich with its hat with fire being a signal to let the animals, including this fox, that we need to get out of here. What is going on here? This is not a very fun place to be. This is awful. It's just kind of more of a morose narrative, but I really enjoyed the piece, especially with the backing paint. It's not specifically all you won't find a lot of the colors in the background of this one. I really want to create sort of an uneasy feeling with the greens and the yellows. And although it may not be, in my mind, the prettiest backgrounds, I think I succeeded with just adding to the unease and anxiety that was present in this piece itself. You can see, I like it a whole bunch. Let's see here. Moving on to this one over here. This is where I started to get, I would say, objectively more autobiographical in some of these works. A lot of the work from 2019, even the present, wasn't really, I wouldn't say consciously or objectively autobiographical. Granted, when you're creating anything, you're gonna have a motive, whether it's conscious or not, and so things will slip into a bunch of works that way. Whereas with this is one where once I started getting the general composition going, I decided that, okay, I see where this is going actually, and it's not really the most like pretty picture, if you will, but it illustrates where I was mentally, at least for a bunch of us were mentally. This current affair is going on. This is definitely created during the lockdown, so I had a lot more time. There's a lot of detail going on in this piece. It's called Wheel, by the way. And this wheel right here. And what this really is a lot of it's about mortality. We have this mound right here, and it's kind of hard to see some of the details, but as you ascend this mound of what looks like sugary confections or things that at least resemble that, you get to some birthday presents right here and here and here, and eventually you get to this little tombstone. It's pretty much an ascension towards our eventual mortality, and just how am I dealing with this existing right now? A lot of that is entailed in this wheel itself. This wheel is, I'd say, 85–90% composed of food, computer, and those two things. And that was a lot of identifying what I was doing during this lockdown. The past time was consuming a lot of content and eating a lot more food than I probably should have, especially the less healthy range. And then as these things are going on, as I'm mentally regarding it, if I were to put myself in this piece, let's just say that's me right there. As this is all going on, there's this crazy just bacchanal going on behind. My friends, when looking at a bunch of my work, described as being either critical, showing signs of being critical of excess and bacchanals. Those are two things I really considered objectively, but then after she had said those things, it just really stuck in my mind. I sort of leaned into it, the whole hitting the ground running with that idea. And so especially with the flower collection, there's this really populated scenes going on. It's very chaotic, but they're interacting with each other. A lot of colors, either popping out or sort of falling in the background. And yeah, I just looking at this piece makes me tired. It was a very laborious one. A lot of when sketching this stuff out, I'll even have to cut out pieces of flowers, and I'll sort of shove them in and try to get them to sort of, okay, I can see what this is going to sort of look like, but now I'm going to take a whole day and paste this piece by piece, layer by layer, and it's a lot of work. But once I get to the end of the piece, I'd say 9 out of 10 times I look and I go, there's my dopamine shot. I feel like I did something real good here, and I like it. And as long as I like it, that is wonderful. It's incidental if others like it, but please like my work. Moving on to this one right here. This goes again, one more later ones, and it also goes with a bunch of not a bunch, but the themes that were mentioned here. This one is called Content. You can also read it as Content. You've got these two individuals, royalty or what have you. They are clearly bored out of their mind, but they are being entertained. We're trying to be engaged by all this stuff going on, all this content. And you got orchestra playing. You've got some mass dancers going on. You have these two individuals presenting a television and just a wooden bird. I won't get into what the wooden bird means specifically. But there's this crazy stuff. Hercules performing feats of strength. You got Pan playing the fife. So much is going on, vying for attention, highly entertaining. They couldn't be more bored or just content with the content that they're absorbing. Now it's a lot of maybe time go by during lockdowns, absorbing content and not really thinking too hard about the fact that I'm just absorbing it in. Although I may be entertained or distracted, but I'm definitely having my hand against my cheek, leaning into my chair. It's definitely just expressing sort of those autobiographical frustrations. And again, it's just very push-pull on how much I put into a piece that way or how much I don't put in a piece. But for these two, Content and Wheel, were very objectively autobiographical. Let's see. And the last one I'll go over. It's the last one that I made for the Flower series, and it's called Awake. And this is the last one. Is incredibly packed up, and the big phrase that kept on leaping in my mind when I was making this one lead up to this showing was cash in. I want to cash in as much as I can, as long as it makes sense. I don't want to just throw something on there and have it okay, it doesn't matter if it's interacting with anything or matches color or not. No, I want to be able to cash in and just like put as much of like what I have in reserve into a piece. But man, I still want to make sense, at least in my mind. And what I like, the thing I really, really like about this one specifically is with all the 8 other flower pieces, the flowers are a very, very major point, almost like a big focal point of the pieces themselves. Very, very pretty. But with this one, with how crowded it is, the flowers are almost incidental. They've finally really become just serving the purpose of being the footing to anchor the piece down. So people, animals, things are not floating in the air. And yeah, so again, very autobiographical with this awake being, just try to place myself in the piece. There's me smack dab right there. I am very awake. I am looking at my computer. I wish I was sleeping. There's so much going on around me. If I could not sleep, it's constantly everything and anything will be and has been on my mind from me. And just to sort of get a little, I don't even know if the word cute would really fall into it, but really getting a slightly topical with, I got the sun right here. It's pretty much a coronavirus sun. I was trying to find the things that really matched up as best as possible with what would look like a coronavirus, because that is a major thing that is currently engulfing everyone's life right now. And normally, don't like really putting things that seem really on the nose, but it just really made sense with what I was trying to achieve with this being crazy, chaotic, and reflective of just like the overwhelming amount of these things and that are going on in the world. It's hard to keep track of it all and causes a lot of duress. But with that very macabre thing in mind, I still want to present something that is beautiful and colorful with a lot hidden in plain sight. I really, really enjoy when I color match things to sort of hide things, camouflage, like with the enough piece with the butterflies. And again, looking at this one with the cage and the tree right there, it's just all the time spent to get those things cut out and problem solving from the sense of how am I going to be able to cut this like little fragile piece without breaking it, and sort of just trying to figure out the methodology to be able to achieve that. Trying to solve some problems with which way I can phrase it. So that's a lot of the flowers work. So to move on to the final collection, which would be over here, is titled Horizons.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So for this collection right here, this is the Horizons collection. It is 37 works, and they're all the smaller scale. Now, the things that initially, I'm not sure if it inspires the word to use, but the things that really sort of made me want to pursue this was, when I cropped the larger works of the larger boards to make the smaller collage pieces fit in its scale or get the composition to fit right, I'll have a whole bunch of, spare wood with some really pretty designs on them, some really pretty colors and spray paint stuff going on. So I wanted to be able to not just use those pieces, but to elevate them. It gives me smaller, more less anxiety for experimentation. So I'm experimenting on a larger board. If I mess up something on that, and that's the whole board right there. If I'm working on a smaller piece, the stakes are a lot lower in that regard, at least for my brain. It's just this. And the other main thing when I started working on this collection was to establish the rule of no people. Throughout all the works you've seen, people have been the main driver of the narrative. They're pretty much like paper dolls, pretty much. You can set them up in certain things. They can point to other things to direct the composition or the viewer. They can look at other things. A lot of my later work, I'll actually obscure eyes as much as possible because I really don't like things that are looking directly at you because that immediately arrests the viewer to that one spot when I really want the whole gestalt to sort of lead the viewer around. I want the composition not get stalled by someone that's looking directly out at you. And so I usually, especially these days, look for more people that are looking in different directions or even turned around because they'll create some direction going that way. So taking people out of the equation was a challenge. I started to think about, well, what am I going to do to really substitute for people to be able to drive a narrative? Do I even want to have narratives in these pieces? And this is around the time when I was really thinking about, footing as well. So the internal compromise I came to was having animals be the subject matter, and for the footing to utilize horizons, hence the name. Went through I would say about 80 National Geographics that I have long collected from institutions like the Scrap Exchange, and went through them all and found all the scenes of nature that didn't have people explicitly in them, and cut them out, and again, building a humongous reservoir of these horizons to be able to play with them as far as doing my sketching thing where I put one on a board. All right, maybe I'm gonna try this one. Well, this one is actually more of the color of this one. And then once I did the first 15 of them, I really found myself having a good time, almost liberated from using people to using them for so much of direct narrative. I just wanted to do something different for my sake. And as I started making these pieces, once I got to about the 15th one, an overall narrative emerged. The overall narrative being with the no people was that these animals, these environments exist in a post-human world. How far in the future that would be, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but there are no humans, they're clearly gone, and much of what this work is the animals either reclaiming, their old stomping grounds, interacting with, let's see, what's the phrase I was thinking was, interacting with like artifacts of future past humans. What I mean by future past is like imagine just like having technology where it is today. Go into the future a whole bunch, you got some great technology, but then at some point from that point on, humans would cease to exist. You have all these things that would be deemed artifacts, but they're, from the future. They have different functionalities that would be completely unfamiliar to us with our current, how we see technology or understanding of technologies these days. And so once I had that sort of like, put that narrative in my head and then just like said, you know what, I think I could work with this, I like it, hit the ground running. And what you see from that is just 38 smaller scale pieces as a result. Wow. So I'll go through a couple examples of the main things I was saying where the animals interacting with artifacts, depictions of triumph over surroundings, but also depictions of like more pastoral and relaxed situations. Animals, they don't have humans to really harass them at this point. Other nature, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but it's like scenes of just like, now I can relax. So as far as some of the depictions of interactions with artifacts, we have things like this chicken right here, this nice little peacock feather. See this telephone right there, and looks like an old telephone that's got a little light on it. Whether the chicken itself ignited the telephone itself, or that's part of the future functionality of that phone, I don't know. But it's just really, just spoke in that moment, and with the beautiful color backgrounds and trying to just get things to really match up with the peacock feather itself, especially with the horizon itself and the chicken and the phone being just plain black and white. So I really enjoyed the outcome of that piece. Another interaction with, let's see here, artifacts. This is one. Oh, by the way, these pieces are just named Horizon 1 through 38, so I'm not going to go through the titles themselves. With this one, we got this, kind of hard to see with the coloration, but we got the snake right here over this like sort of mined area, and it's coiled around this giant, not light posts, what are those called? Power lines. And you see it interacting with the power line itself, this gigantic like power line, especially with the comparison to the rest of the scenery itself, the snake being huge as well, the way I was able to mentally justify having to scale the animals being like really big or really small. It's like, well, when I think post-human, what is the first thing I think about? I think about radiation and fallout. So I imagine, some mutations or something like that, just for a narrative purpose, to be able to soothe my brain when creating these things to justify the scale. That was something that really gave me a good chuckle once I came to that conclusion. Like, okay, now I really have a lot more freedom to be able to just like put something that's either really big or really small, but in my mind, that's how big it should be in the situation. That's how big it would appear if you were there in that case. Let's see. And And a third one of examples of interactions with human artifacts from future past humans, however phrases, rabbit right here. Very big rabbit, taking a look at this box. What I gather from the piece, if I were to say what I believe what had occurred in the moments leading up to this, is the rabbit had the box, put it out there, opened it, went back from a safe distance to see these small orbs gradually going to the sky, and then pondering, what the heck is going on here? What is this thing that I just opened up? I'd like thinking of, even for myself, thinking of like traveling through time and finding like something that I have no idea how it works, and then trying to figure out what that would be. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a book that has really pretty pencil drawings. It's just that, where it's aliens going to Earth, post-human Earth, no humans around, and they're finding things like a porcelain toilet and trying to figure out what this is, and concluding things on the lines of, well, this must have been used for like religious ceremonies. Thoughts like that really just like tickle the brain for me, and so it really just influenced where I was going with animals interacting with these artifacts. Depictions of triumph. So a lot of this is, once humans being gone, animals having these moments of, okay, reclaiming this area, but also in addition to that, doing things to be extraordinary even in times when there were humans. A good example of that would be this right here, where you got a snail that's reached some abnormal height over this natural rock formation and is very pleased with itself, as it should be. It has triumphed over this almost insurmountable landscape, at least I would imagine if I were that snail itself. Another one is triumph. One triumph is elephant and his horse on top of this very, very snowy, almost uncomfortable looking mountain, just from all the snow going on right there. But they're clearly, almost a buddy cop film where it's like, we did it, we got here. It's a very enjoyable spot to be. And another one of that is this bird right here. Another on top of a mountain, clearly going on top of the mountain, like flexing, if you will. I've conquered this, this thing is mine again, as opposed to having to share it with others, whether it be animal or human. All right. And then depictions of more pastoral, or just nice scenes, if you will. Scenes with no conflict, I guess, would be the best way to put it. So where's an example of that? Oh, there you go. Come back to this. So above the rabbit one, it can be kind of hard to see in it, but you've got this cat on top of this mountain. It's not really on top of the mountain in like a way that I would say demonstrates conquest, triumph. This cat is lounging on top of the mountain, checking out these birds that are up here. It's just a nice scene. And you got the waterfall, you've got the cat, you got the birds. It's just, there's really no conflict going on, unless you count the fact that the cat likely wants to eat the boys, but they're up high up there. Another very pastoral. This one's kind of a mix of pastoralness and human artifacts, where you have this scene right here. You have these two towers that are very, very shiny, very strange shape. Who knows if they're towers or ships or what their actual purpose are, but they are there, clearly long left after whatever occurrence that made humans not there. But you see this cat, this mother cat right here with two kittens, and they're just basking in what seems like warm snow, if you ask me. It sounds very, very nice. I guess warm snow is rain, but let's not think about that. And so, just having a very nice time, and indulging in being able to relax and to just be with those kittens, being with its young without having to worry about others, especially humans, coming and mucking up the scene. I guess a final one for a relaxed depiction. Got a doggy right here, just hanging out, checking out this really weird moon. You see a cage at the top of the moon. I would say that is another artifact sort of thing, where that's clearly erected on the moon. Someone got there, someone put it there. What its purpose is, who knows? Are there actually people there? If they're there, they're clearly not on Earth. And so as a result, we have this very nice pup having a nice chill moment. A lot of working with these smaller pieces was playing the game in my head of, well, when I'm working with the flowers, really packing in as much stuff. With the horizons, I wanted to try to pull back and see how much I could convey with as few pieces as possible. Granted, with that being a rule, it can be bent, it can be broken, and some of these pieces definitely have a ton of things going on. There's a whole bunch of them, like this one right here, where it's this cat hanging out in this very chilly expanse, it is just two pieces of collage. And if I'm able to sort of convey that feeling or sense of this place with just those two pieces, that's incredibly rewarding. You know, it's all up to the subjectivity of the viewer, but for me, I find that to be a big success when I'm able to do that. And whew, that is my 3 collections. We've gone over a couple of pieces. If you wish to take a look at these pieces online, you can check out my website, www.spraygaz.com. All 3 of these collections are viewable on that as well. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, where I post new works I'm working on, follow me at SprayGaze, which is, again, SprayGaze. Yeah, and with that in mind, I just want to say I hope everyone is doing as well as they can be, especially in these times, and I hope they are. Please be safe and to think of others. Empathy is in short supply, and I hope that we're able to pass as much of it along as possible so we can understand each other a whole lot better. And once you have that understanding of how others that are not you feel, I think it's a good starting point to be able to evolve in these very troubling times. Stay safe, be well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Cade, and thank you for joining our live streamed artist talk, live from the Nicholson Gallery here at the Art Center in Carborough. As Cade mentioned, if you're interested in viewing more of his work, you can go to spraygaze.com. I've dropped that URL in the chat for you, or follow him on Instagram at spraygaze. If you're interested in purchasing any of the works you saw today, you can email info@artscenterlive.org, and someone will help you with that. And thank you for joining us. Have a great night. We did it.